Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode review of The Bad Batch. Today we are taking a look at Infested, which thankfully has nothing to do whatsoever with Geonosian brainworms. Because knowing this show, and knowing the callbacks that are on this show, when I saw that was the title of the episode, I was like, oh no, here come the Geonosian brainworms, because, well, we might as well, right? But no, this has nothing to do with Geonosian brainworms. This is instead a kind of a let's get some revenge on someone that Sid doesn't like and steal their spice from the Pikes, which is real smart. And there's a nest of creepy crawlies, because of course there is. There's always something on one of these planets. There's always something that wants to kill you. Hoth, Wampas, Ord Mantell, whatever the heck these creepy crawlies are. So, yeah, and then, of course, Geonosis is just Geonosians everywhere. I mean, sentient bugs, no, thank you. So, yeah, I don't know if I really have a lot to say about this one. This is the first episode since the Braca excursion with Rex that I'm really just kind of like, okay. Now, of course, I was a little okay on the Braca excursion episode, but then I ended up kind of coming around on it after the next episode or two, because I was, because I'm like, okay, this is obviously a part one. I'm going to have to see how part two turns out before I really render a complete verdict on this episode. And so then after part two came out, then I was kind of more on board for that first episode. I'm like, okay, no, that was better than I gave it credit for. I just need to see part two to see how part one held up. This time around, though, this I don't think is a part one. I think this is just another standalone episode, and I think there is setup in this episode. I think that this episode is set up for something that will happen later. Maybe not later this season. If we do, well, and that's the thing. Are we getting a second season? If we are getting a second season, then I think this is probably one of those. I think this is a setup for a story arc in season 2, maybe. But unless some of the stuff that they've been setting up in this episode comes back into play in like 2 episodes in the finale, because we don't have many episodes left here. So yeah, I think this Deveronian guy, who when I saw the first image of him online and like the preview image online, I'm like, oh, here we go. We got Vizago. We've got Vizago from Star Wars Rebels, but no, it was someone different completely. Which again, I was expecting at this point. I was expecting a callback in the show, but no, it turned out to be some new guy. So I think the Bad Batch kind of sparing him and not letting I guess the Pikes didn't necessarily want to kill him anyway. Just made it look like they were going to, and him sort of kind of forming a connection with Omega. I think maybe that's going to come back into play later. Of course, I said the same thing about the Zygerians earlier in the season. I'm like, oh, we're totally going to see them again. And so far, there's been zip about them. It's not too late. Like I said, we've got 3 or 4 episodes left, so it's very possible that they could still pop back up. And again, if we get a season 2, possible they could pop back up. But so far, there's been zilch from those Zygerians. And I'm like, well, the main guy survived. So, I mean, he could totally turn into a recurring villain, right? And so far, nothing. So, which is odd, considering they're still on Ord Mantell. I really thought that he would show up, that Zygerian guy would show him back up by now, but oh well. So, yeah, this was a pretty simple sneak into a place, reused assets of sneaking into a place, steal some spice, lose some spice. I will say, I think that this episode was better than another episode of Star Wars where they have to get some spice and then they lose some spice. Looking at you, Clone Wars Season 7. Again, if you go back to my reviews for those episodes, I don't hate those episodes, but they're definitely not, as up to the standard of, say, the first Bad Batch arc from Clone Wars Season 7, or, of course, the Siege of Mandalore. Those episodes are fine, but, they're kind of lackluster comparatively. So I will say that I think this episode is better than those episodes with Trace and Rafa from Season 7 of Clone Wars. But so it's just kind of funny that they have the spice containers to kind of tie everything together. Um, it's kind of interesting how there's my one use of the word interesting for today. Kind of interesting how recently in the last year and a half or so, Star Wars has kind of been obsessed with. I'm not gonna say obsessed, but they've been showing more of the Star Wars underworld, the Star Wars underbelly, crime syndicates and stuff. And it's like here's how they get their drug money. That's not. That's one of those things where, they use different words and stuff like that. Where my dad turned to me when they're talking about spice this and spice that in this episode. And he's like, "What is spice? Is that supposed to be a drug?" I'm like, "Yeah, it's sort of kind of like cocaine, where it's got a medicinal use, but in its raw form, it's very addictive. So people just like to sniff it or whatever." I think you put Dice, the EA developer. I think you put spice in Death Sticks. So that's it. So it's just kind of funny to me how in the last year and a half or so we've seen a lot of these crime syndicates and how they make their money. Especially considering we've seen a lot of the Pikes recently. And they're these big spice runners. So it's just kind of funny where it's like here you are a parent. Your 6-year-old or whatever wants to watch some Star Wars on Disney Plus. It's like, okay, little Johnny, go ahead, watch some Star Wars on Disney Plus. It's Star Wars, so it's totally suitable for all ages. And then little Johnny comes back a half hour later and is asking, "What spice?" And they're like, "I don't know. Show me what you're talking about." And then parents are going, "Oh, that's like Star Wars drugs." "Oh, okay." Okay, how do I explain this now? So, just one of those ways that, on the occasion, Star Wars can get a little bit more, PG-13, shall we say. And it's funny. I'm pretty sure that this show, actually, considering this show is not on TV, it's not rated, like the typical ratings for TV, like TVY7 or whatever, TV PG or whatever. Shows usually get rated, so I don't actually know what Bad Batch would be rated, if it would be rated, younger or for older audiences. I mean, considering it's a continuation of Clone Wars, I would assume that it's meant for the slightly older audience, like 10 and up. But I don't know. So that's just a funny thing. Now I'm imagining a little 6-year-old little Johnny watching season 7 of Clone Wars. It's like, ooh, it's a Star Wars animated show. It's like, I want to watch this, and just diving right in, and not really bothering to go back and watch everything beforehand, just jumping like straight into the siege of Mandalore. It's like, well, congrats, kid. You've been traumatized right along with the rest of us. So, yeah. I don't really have too much to say. This episode was totally fine. Not the best, not the worst episode that Star Wars animation has ever produced. I'm curious to see if I didn't use interesting there. I managed to stop myself. I'm curious to see if this is set up for stuff in the future, or if this is just a one-off. In which case, it's like okay, maybe this episode could have been put to better use, considering we've only got like 3 or 4 episodes left in the season. But again, it's one of those things where I don't completely judge a show in the content of its episodes until a season or the show has run its complete course, and then you can really judge. It's like, okay, well, here's episodes, 13, 14, 15. They kind of went nowhere, so maybe you could have redone those episodes and made them matter a little bit more if this was all we were going to get from the show, stuff like that. So, I guess just in terms of one thing I did notice that I thought was kind of funny was, and it's just one of those things where it's like, man, this show just looks so good, and it's continuation of Clone Wars and the art style that they've perfected over years, and they've really come so far with it. Is that there's a scene where Sid's walking with the Bad Batch on the streets of Ord Mantell, and I don't know how else to describe it, but her old grandma neck was moving around. That's the only way I can think to describe it. Is kind of the loose hanging skin around her neck that grandmas have and stuff because they're old or whatever. Sid has that too, and as they're walking around, we haven't had too much movement from Sid when we've seen her in past episodes. Mostly it's just she kind of been standing in one place or sitting behind a desk or something like that. So there hasn't really been a lot of movement, but she did a lot of, like walking around and moving and stuff this episode. So her like old lady neck was moving around all the time. And I'm like, that was a detail you guys didn't need to bother to animate or put in there. But you did. And I respect that. So just nice kind of like little background touch. Just kind of makes everything feel a little bit more lived in and realistic, even though this is, Clone Wars and Bad Batch have always been very, very stylized. Because I think that was some of like the original complaints back in the day when the movie came out. And well, considering it's the movie, I can kind of understand that because the animation wasn't as refined as it is today. But one of the complaints, I remember looking at reviews back then, and some of the complaints in the reviews saying it's like, this seems like a obvious ploy just to sell more toys because the character models look exactly like the toys. And that's I don't know if that was an intentional thing where I don't think that was the idea back in the day. It's like, let's make these look as close to the toys as possible. From everything I've seen behind the scenes, it really did seem like that they were trying to adapt the Gennady Tartakovsky style from the Micro series and adapt it from 2D to 3D. And in a lot of cases, you can definitely see where they did that. Count Dooku and Obi-Wan are some really big examples of that in terms of their character designs. Of course, Dooku having the very pointy chin, that's taken straight from the Micro series, and then Obi-Wan kind of having the kind of more squared off rectangular beard appearance that kind of got a little bit more it became a little more circular and less angular as the show went on, especially when they got to season 7 and they revamped some of those character models. So those that were very much a trying to adapt from the 03 Micro series. So I don't necessarily agree. But then I will admit that the toys did look very close to the character model. So I think that was just Hasbro did a good job designing the toys rather than the show was designed around the toys or whatever. But there's a lot of cynical Star Wars fans out there, and especially back. I mean, there are now, of course, but especially back. I'm not gonna really go into it. I can make a whole video on Star Wars fan base because that's like a 3-hour video you could work on. But especially I feel like in some ways it's better, in some ways it's worse. It depends on who you talk to. But back in the late 2000s, 2005 and 2010, there were a lot of cynical Star Wars fans out there, especially when Clone Wars was first starting because the prequels were over. A lot of people still had a bad taste in their mouth from the prequels, which I sort of kind of understand. And there's just there was no hope for Star Wars. It was all bad. Then J.J. Abrams comes around, and all of a sudden it's saved. And then they realized that he wasn't the savior they thought, and Dave Filoni was the real savior all along. So again, like I said, I could get into a 3-hour video just about that, but I'm not going to. So, so I think that's really all I have for this episode of Bad Batch Infested. I am eager to see where we go from here, since we do only have a couple episodes left in this season or of this show. Who knows if we're going to get a second season? I guess we'll find out soon, hopefully. And, so I guess I'll see you guys next week. Thank you for watching. Remember to like, comment, subscribe, all that great stuff. Remember to follow me on Twitter and Instagram. Those links are in the description below, and I'll see you guys next time. Thank you so much for watching again, and goodbye.